Describe the Soulsborne series in one word. Any word that just comes to mind. I'm sure many of us would say challenging or unforgiving due to the harsh difficulty that allows little room for errors, maybe even immersive or atmospheric. The series does have an incredible set of worlds, each filled with a variety of environments that do an amazing job at keeping us engaged with the game. Or perhaps you're thinking something along the lines of cryptic or confusing. These games certainly do not hold your hand, and they enjoy hiding fragments of the lore away for players to piece together on their own. But today I won't be focusing on those ideas, on their own anyway. If you want my answer, then well, for the sake of the video, I'll have to go with horror. Now the word horror can be used pretty broadly here. In this video I'll be talking about a few ideas that will amplify how effective the Souls series is at using horror to its advantage. How it can paralyze a player with an overwhelming sense of fear and tension, utterly destroy another one psychologically, or even mesmerize the rest atmospherically. Some games in the series lean into elements of horror a bit more than the others, but they've all undoubtedly given us a sense of terror, shock or disgust a couple of times. The Soulsborne series isn't usually categorized as traditional survival horror. However, its design philosophy shares many core principles with that genre, particularly in how it evokes fear, tension and the overwhelming sense of vulnerability. Survival horror games are usually characterized by limited resources, challenging difficulty, recurring threats to the player and a constant need to be on the lookout. Elements that are all, what I'd say, integral to the Soulsborne experience. One of the most basic things in any Souls game is your health bar, which can be chipped away at by regular enemies or downright eviscerated by bosses. Managing your health bar is the key to getting far in any of the games. To complement that, you're given limited healing resources, grass, esters, blood vials, etc. that can help you survive through encounters until you reach a checkpoint where they replenish themselves. This scarcity in resources though forces players to approach each area cautiously, knowing they can't rely on spamming healing items to brute force their way through enemies. You have to carefully assess situations at times and decide how to approach an encounter. Depending on how much healing the player has left, you may be in for a rough, stress-inducing path ahead of you. This plays into certain areas and certain games a lot more than others. The go-to example I'll mention here is Dark Souls 1, and in particular Blighttown. For as much crap as the area gets, I think it's a genuine masterpiece when it comes to evoking an incredible sense of overwhelming tension from the player. Think about it for a second. You've been playing through the whole world of Lordran, traversing area to area, slowly descending the world from the lower undead burg to the depths. At this point you are far from the safety of Firelink Shrine and things only go deeper. Discovering Blighttown is the turning point in a player's journey. Realizing that you are incredibly far under, lacking the ability to fast travel out of there, turning back is not an option as you need to keep going. Each encounter becomes a boss fight in of itself, with your Estus rolling extremely low. Enemies appearing from every direction, nipping away at you as you realize you may be here for a while. The search for the next bonfire turns from trying to simply find a place to level up to trying to scrounge for some peace where you can breathe without the worry of death. It turns this challenging action RPG where we're trying to clear the area and its boss into a terrifying descent into madness. The boss of the area only becomes a backdrop in your mind as you're just trying to survive. All of this surviving just goes to create one of the game's most defining moments for players' journey, as they find their escape out of the hellhole and manage to get back to Firelink Shrine. Genuinely, escaping Blighttown's clutches and seeing the light of the world felt even more impactful than killing Quelaag on my first playthrough. That just goes to show how horrifying Blighttown was. The series also capitalizes on the fear of losing progress, another crucial aspect of horror survival. A bit different in this case, as when players die, they lose all their main currency that they've collected. The runes, the blood echoes, the souls, and retrieving them requires returning to the spot of their death for the most part. The threat of losing an entire area's worth of hard-earned progress if they die and die again before retrieval naturally creates a lot of ever-present pressure that makes every step feel risky. It makes every movement feel punishable and amplifies the stress and suspense to another level. This also ties into the psychological warfare this series can inflict upon players. You see, about 99% of the time, you are on your own, solo, all by yourself. The worlds in these games are often vast, desolate and filled with danger at every turn, yet the player is almost always all by themselves. Interactions with NPCs are sparse, and the few allies that the player does meet often have their own tragic self-destructive arcs, reinforcing the sense that camaraderie often ends in disaster and that no one can truly be trusted. Even narratively, in the Dark Souls trilogy, the concept of hollowing is kinda tied to isolation. Characters who lose their purpose and become disconnected from others eventually go hollow, turning into mindless, hostile beings. This reflects the psychological toll of being alone and the fear of losing one's sense of self when cut off from others. The few NPCs who try to maintain hope often fail, succumbing to their own isolation and becoming hollow themselves. In Bloodborne, the players try to navigate the nightmarish streets of Yharnam, where nearly every human has gone mad or turned into a beast. The city, now a forsaken wasteland, and the few survivors are either hostile or on the verge of insanity. This pervasive sense of being alone in a hostile, incomprehensible world taps into the core of psychological horror, where isolation amplifies fear and helplessness. The Soulsborne series has earned its legendary reputation for several reasons: its punishing difficulty, its deep and cryptic lore, and its rich, atmospheric world building. However, one of the most distinguishing and brilliant aspects of the series lies in its enemy and boss designs, and when they go above and beyond, it really is hard not to gloss over the fact. These designs can more often than not be a basic, realistic enemy, something that one of us could have thought up and put in. But there are times when these creatures are more than just regular opponents. They can be the most nightmarish creation pulled from the corners of the mind that only the wildest of imaginations can venture off to. Like seriously, some of these enemy designs throughout the series are... Designers, man, you need to be checked up on. Looking past the sheer terror and cringe that I feel when I see some of these creatures, they're also brilliant at embodying some of the underlying themes from their respective worlds. The pursuit of knowledge and the insanity that comes from it, the decay and despair that has plagued your world, a literal piece of shit. Not really though, being able to convey the madness and lunacy of some of your characters or even the world itself through enemy and boss designs is a tremendous way of storytelling. If you really want to dive deeper and look specifically at a game to point out the true horrifying genius of enemy design, then look no further than Bloodborne. It's got about everything that the mind can conjure, a plethora of grotesque, twisted, monstrous design at each turn that create a nightmarish world. Some of the sickest, and I say sickest in every sense of the word, boss designs that FromSoft have ever come up with, even to this day. The beast bosses are exceptional and hammer home the roots of the game and how each regular person we speak to can turn into an unspeakable creature. The cleric beast and its deafening screams serve as a terrifying yet amazing introductory boss. The blood-starved beast, with its truly grotesque skin flapping about as they dart towards you in a highly unpredictable pattern, but none as visceral and memorable as Vicar Amelia. She captures your attention from the moment you enter her boss arena. You can hear her praying to the church, managing to hold herself together before we, the player, enter the arena, breaking her concentration and leading to the cutscene that plays, which is quite graphic even for Bloodborne standards. The cutscene is significant because it portrays the exact moment where Vicar Amelia loses the last vestiges of her humanity. The moment she grips the pendant tightly, her body begins to convulse and spasm, signalling the onset of her transformation. As she lets out a monstrous roar, her body rapidly mutates, growing larger and more beastly until she fully transforms into a massive wolf, dog, deer-like creature that the player must face in battle. At this point in the game, the player still doesn't have an inkling of understanding as to what the hell is going on in the game, as we have to take on the beast. Vicar Amelia is a truly horrifying figure, a ghastly sight that lunges at us, with the deafening screams of the cleric beast combined with the frenzied, flailing moveset of the blood-starved beast. Yet there's something quite sad and tragic about her. At the end of the cutscene, she turns focus to the player in her beast design, looking sort of timid and confused, and it shows in a boss fight. Rather than acting like a typical boss, the way she thrashes and slashes at you actually makes you feel like it's a fearful human or animal responding to a threat. When she begins to pray and I begin to beat her senselessly to make sure she doesn't regain too much health, it feels almost barbaric and borderline abusive. But it's not like Bloodborne ends there with the amazingly terrifying boss designs either. Like there's the unearthly disturbing introduction to the old hunters in Ludwig the Accursed, and the miserable fanatical finale to it with the Orphan of Kos. Both are bosses with horrific detail and imaginative designs that raise their stature in the eyes of many. Eyes, funny. But another example I'll mention that might seem a bit out of left field would be the Gaping Dragon from Dark Souls 1. Exploring the entirety of the sewer-filled depths just to come to the end and be brought with this abomination was absolutely nuts. Its cutscene starts off by painting it as some harmless creature until it just keeps going and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger until the final reveal, and it's some nasty, disgusting dragon craving for its next victim. Focusing on enemy designs for a second, can we just talk about how many fucked up creatures roam about these worlds? We should get a free ticket to therapy based on the amount of abnormal entities that we have to coexist with. Demon Souls, and particularly World 3, the Tower of Latria, harbour the game's most horrific creatures, the terrifying mind flayers as well as the man centipedes that crawl around the bottom of 3-2. The game with the most abnormal enemies would have to be Elden Ring, right? And I mean quantity wise. I'm not even going to bother listing them off, but just think about Caelid. Almost every enemy from that region is nightmare fueled. Dark Souls 3 though has possibly the scariest enemy encounters, from the wretches to the sewer centipedes to the awful monstrosities of sin. This game in particular has no shortage of entities that will make you wince and recoil at the very sight of them. In short, to round this section off, the horrifying enemy and boss designs of the Soulsborne series are nothing short of masterful. They do more than just present difficult challenges. They elevate the narrative, increase the tension, and immerse the player in a world where every encounter feels significant. Whether through symbolic representations of the game's themes, grotesque body horror, or even tragic backstories, these designs are integral to why we love the series, and are horrific to the point where we just stare in admiration sometimes. One aspect of the Souls series I'm sure we're all appreciative of is its atmosphere across the board. FromSoft have done an immaculate job at being able to paint whatever picture they damn please, whether it be a plague-ridden, beast-filled city, or a forbidden land, or even the damn picture itself. The team always excel at making their created areas come to life, be it through clever use of sound design, lighting, or even the environment. The Soulsborne atmosphere is as much of a character as any of the enemies or NPCs that the player encounters. In regards to how terrifying these games can become, FromSoftware skillfully utilizes the environment to create immersive worlds where fear isn't always direct or explicit, but it creeps in gradually, seeping into the player's psyche. Every aspect of the world, from the eerily quiet pathways to the haunting soundscapes, is used in different ways, whether it's to build tension or to get players imagining twisted scenarios in their heads, or even if it's just to outright make us crap ourselves. Whenever FromSoft wants, they'll really play with us and string us along a terrifying journey, in particular with their most recent DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree. Spoilers if you haven't played it yet. An area is added in which this exact thing happens. Yes, I'm sure those of you who've played through the most recent edition have been thinking about it the entire video. The Abyssal Woods. For a series that doesn't really do jump scares, that sound effect of Torrent randomly just throwing you off and refusing to come out had me frozen in place when it first happened. I spoke earlier about how these games make us feel isolated. However, that wasn't really the case for Elden Ring, because when it came to exploring the expansive planes that were on offer, we were always escorted by Torrent. He became a companion more valuable than any other and rode with us through thick and thin. Whether it was bobbing and weaving through chaotic battlefields, saving us from having to dip our toes into any hazardous swamps, or accompanying us into a boss fight, Torrent was our partner and never made an area dull. I may be sounding dramatic, but having him ripped from under us felt like a betrayal. It felt like being backstabbed by a friend of over a decade. But what it also does is build this area up magnanimously right from the get-go. Having your partner taken away from you means exploring the area alone, in isolation. The Abyssal Woods has an atmosphere unique even to Elden Ring. It is bathed in a smothering ambience where the air feels thick with malice. Alone now, you start to notice more. Your footsteps start feeling heavier. Each enemy's presence feels slightly more different than usual. Dev messages are starting to infiltrate your course of action, and they warn you immensely of whatever it is that lies ahead. Of course, that thing lying ahead of us being the aging, untouchable enemies. You aren't able to face them in regular combat, and the only way of defeating them is by timing a parry against one of their attacks to perfection. If you're snatched by their clutches, then madness will override you. Essentially, the best course of action when they're in the equation is to sneakily make your way past them using any tall hedges or distractions that you can find. But the fact that they turn this area of the game into a damn stealth level speaks volumes to how terrifying they are. I love the Abyssal Woods for how it was able to flip the script and elicit these terrified feelings out of me. So different to all of the other areas in Elden Ring. Moving on from an area that uses its environment to paralyze us into place, to areas that use smaller details that may or may not go under the radar. When it comes to sound design, one of my favourite and creepiest levels in the series is 3-1, the Prison of Hope from Demon Souls. The level's dark, narrow corridors are filled with distant echoing sounds that make players feel isolated yet watched at the same time, heightening that uneasy feeling you get from this area. The persistent chains rattling in the background and the momentary screams of the NPC Rydell are noises that accompany you throughout the level, almost taunting you in a way as you try and make your way through this labyrinthine nightmare where progress feels sparse and death only a moment away thanks to the petrifying mind flayers. Even the echoing footsteps of your own character on the stone floor plays a crucial role in creating anxiety. The starkness of the sound makes the space feel hollow and vast, even in its cramped layout, while the silence between footfalls become a breeding ground for paranoia. From sound effects to actual music, let's move back to Bloodborne. Imagine playing through the game for your first time. You're just going about, killing whatever crap you find. You've completed Old Jarnum and felled the horrific blood-starved beast, and come back to the familiar grounds of the cathedral ward. You walk just outside and notice an enemy you haven't encountered yet. He wasn't there before, you might be thinking, so you go and try to kill it, seeing what it's about, and it obliterates you. But you don't get spawned back at the last lantern. Instead, a new cutscene plays, one where you've seemingly been kidnapped and are in a sack being dropped off in a new location. When you wake, this incredibly eerie choir music is playing for once, which makes things even more intimidating than usual, as these games rarely include music while traversing through their levels. It's this music that gives the levels so much character, combined with the fact that you've been dragged here against your will, and every footstep you take from there on feels very wrong. It's similar to the part in the Duke's Archives after trying to kill Seath the first time, except the noise you awaken to that time is absolutely ear penetration. Here it makes your exploration feel much more significant, finding messages that seem like lunacy and running into NPCs that have seemingly been put through the same situation as you. It's all unnerving as fuck. Another way to frighten the player whilst playing through your game can be through the use of lighting, or perhaps the lack thereof. Restricting one of the 5 senses is a surefire way to make people feel uncomfortable, as showcased in Dark Souls 2 with the gutter. It is a prime example of how lighting design can be used to create a terrifying and oppressive atmosphere. The near total darkness forces players to navigate cautiously, with limited visibility and with the constant fear of ambush lingering over their shoulders. Using the torch mechanic that Dark Souls 2 offers up to players is absolutely essential if they don't want to cower whilst moving forward, although that does mean offering up your offhand and whatever you are using in that slot. The decision to allow players to light sconces throughout the area provides for a temporary sense of relief, but it is fleeting. The few patches of light feel like fragile beacons in a sea of darkness, highlighting the overall bleak atmosphere that the gutter specialises in. To a smaller, yet perhaps a more effective degree, let's take a look at Bloodborne once again. Last time, I promise. Whenever the question of scariest area of the series comes up, I see one answer dominating, and that's the Upper Cathedral Ward, which is making its appearance now. Going through this area makes you recount all the experiences you've had with horror in your life up until this point to help you navigate around this absolute nightmare. Getting into the main building and being met with an inky black set of hallways to maneuver around was about as stress inducing as possible. Walking to pick up an item only to get jump scared by a werewolf felt like one of the cheapest yet scariest moments of the game, undoubtedly. But the moment everyone remembers is when the chandelier drops to the ground amidst the pitch black darkness. Oh my goodness, that might have been the closest I've ever been to shitting myself whilst playing one of these games. The rapid moving steps combined with their glowing blue eyes was enough for me to run back behind the door like a little bitch. And I know I'm not alone in that. Overall though, the lighting design makes both the gutter and the Upper Cathedral Ward some of the most atmospheric, frightening and most memorable locations in their respective games, elevating the player's sense of dread and fear throughout both areas. I didn't know where to include this encounter because I felt it ticked all the boxes for making something absolutely terrifying. But switching over to Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice for once, and specifically the encounter against the headless mini-boss. From the design to the atmosphere to the sheer pressure it thrusts into you during battle, they really created a dime with this fight. And it shows because they used it 4 more times during the game. But seriously, my first time discovering the headless after pressing up against that rotating wall was otherworldly. Especially after fighting the armoured warrior, which felt just about as close to a Dark Souls fight as you could get. And then it went to this? Firstly, it being tucked away in its own little cave already gave it such big nope energy. Secondly, the darkness of the cave combined with the elegant yet terrifying music made it distinguish itself from the rest of the bosses. The environment being shrouded in thick fog and dim light, conjuring an oppressive atmosphere of unease and fear before the fight even begins. And the fight itself is also very unusual. It makes you fight at its own pace, slowing your movement and blending about the arena when you least expect it. One of the only bosses who can kill you through terror alone, and bloody hell it applies to me in real life as well. It's an awesome yet horrifying fight, one that I think meshes together many elements to create an extremely strange and unnerving encounter for players. Lesson learned: FromSoftware can do just about whatever they bloody please in these games, and when they go for horror, they know how to do it well. Whether it's by exhausting players out through their traditional survival horror, or tiring them out psychologically, disgusting them through their nightmarish designs, or terrorizing them for the duration of their levels atmospherically, they always manage to evoke these feelings from us. Let me know your experiences regarding any spooky moments throughout your Soul series extravaganza. I hope you've enjoyed your stay here. If you did, please drop a like and subscribe to the channel. I've been Adobo. I hope you all have a fantastic day. Thanks for watching and peace.